Hey. You. Hi there. It's 4:19. Do you have a minute? Good. Then let's pack a bowl. 'Cause it's time for Cannabis Talk, a special 420 themed segment of the Almost Daily Zencast, hosted by spiritual cannabis mystic, the incorrigible Mr. Zappa. Let's get lit, folks! Yeah. Okay. Hi there. It's a little bit earlier than usual. It's actually 3:48 Pacific time, Monday, April 22nd. Happy Earth Day. Happy Passover is, I think, almost over, Passover Day. Depending on which version of Passover you do, and when, and what calendar. Happy you just did Easter and celebrated nailing a dude you call Jesus to a cross. That's a fun one. I have all kinds of thoughts and opinions on that, but whole other episode. Happy Earth Day, though. I think, I could be wrong, folks, I think that Earth Day as it stands is kind of secular, right? Like, it's indigenous people friendly and sort of tribal spiritual adjacent, but it's also trying to be like Christian white people receptive or welcoming. But I digress. I think we need a different day. Entirely. We need a fucking love your mother day. And I mean Mother Earth. Like, you know, like stop chewing on her bones and maybe help heal your mother planet day. Stop exploiting her blood and help Mother Earth be whole again day. But then again, people call me crazy. And this is a much delayed return to Cannabis Talk. Hi. Welcome, friends. I was just having a moment during the opening credit, or the opening music roll, or whatever you call it in the industry, because when I go on hiatus, I literally don't touch any of the tools or files associated with making the podcast. So when I come back to it, it's easy for me to be like, I know what's in that recording, but I don't exactly remember how it goes. It's kind of like with movies, there's different people have a different degree of ability to recall and or quote from movies. I'm one of those people that's like, except for the rare few movies on the exception side of this whole mental paradigm of mine, which I guess I should abdicate, right? Because that's my whole jam. But I think it's less mental paradigm, more like the way I am. But whatever, I digress. If I watch a movie, I can be like, okay, like I just saw Automata with, see what I mean? Antonio Banderas. Took me a second. Also, he doesn't look like himself because he's all like bald. But great. If you like robot movies, if you think you might be into robot movies and you're not sure yet, if you've never seen a good robot movie and you need to see something different this time to really engage you and make you feel a sense of awe and wonder and curiosity, this is the robot movie for you guys. Automata with, I'm probably not saying that correctly, with Antonio Banderas. I'm putting it on the short list for the long-delayed, yet-to-be-kicked-off segment project, mini-project, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's totally irrelevant movie reviews. Stay tuned for that, guys. It's gonna happen one day. I know, like, I started this podcast project like 2 years ago. I realize now that the internet is really good at reminding you of shit that you didn't keep track of. Like, when did I start this? How long have I been paying for this? It's like, oh, by the way, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, here it is. So yeah, I started this podcast project 2 years ago, and clearly it is what I promised it to be. A completely unorthodox, unscripted, unusual, and uncoerced expression of my thoughts and opinions about the world today and what we might choose to do about things. And in this segment, as the name implies, the scope of things focus in on cannabis as an ingredient. So, cannabinoid listeners, I don't know how many of you only listen to some of the segments and not others, but I suspect that of all the segments I produce and will be producing in the future, it's entirely possible that this one might have an audience that might be like, yeah, listen to this, but I don't want to listen to the rest of it. I don't know, because, you might think that it's not a subject matter that interests you. It's okay. I work it all into this show anyway, so you're not missing out. But it does all interconnect. And one of the things I think that connects the strongest, especially on a weekend like this, that I was a little saddened this weekend because of this nexus of synergy that, and I say this with much love and respect and admiration for all who might be involved over there in that dimension that I'm referencing. But I have a day job in my, quote unquote, real life universe. And I do think we live in different universes at the same time, in different ways and along different schisms of individuality being parallelly individual, and yet sort of whatever. But this weekend I had to work, right? I had to be at my day job in my real life universe, and I couldn't be as deeply involved in the kinds of activities that I would typically want to be involved in on this particular weekend. Right? Because although cannabis and its improving level of normalization, right? Which some people might say it's a bad thing. I say it's something that is what it is, and then it's a matter of what we normalize. right? Like, guns themselves are not evil. I agree with gun owners. They are not. The problem is that their design inherently appeals to those who are drawn to do evil things. Because although the guns as inert objects themselves are not evil, they can only do one thing, which is, blow another person's head open. And I know I rail against that in almost every fucking segment. And it's not that I want to take people's guns away, right? Like, pay attention to the memes I post, you guys. You would know, if you just visit my Facebook page every once in a while, that I don't think we need to take anybody's guns away. I do think that if we heal the whole species and achieve some kind of transcendent enlightenment, as indicated by many theorists besides me, I'm just doing a sort of social collective synthesizing and synergizing of all these different strands of theories, of stories from different origins and whatnot, to try to bring a bigger picture and a postmodern, holistic attempt at going, hey, why aren't we looking into this? As I like to remind everyone all the time. But right, like, if we do that, if we achieve that shit, we won't need the guns. No one will give a shit about guns anymore. And I know that sounds crazy. And I know that, as incomprehensible as it is, it's also automatically insulting to people who love guns because they love guns. And I'm not trying to insult anybody. That's not my jam. I'm trying to suggest that we might be due for some self-care, some self-loving, some self-healing, some self-transformation, some self-inspiration and uplifting as a species. Right? Not just as individuals, but as a species, which all of us are. We are all each other. We are all each other's brethren. And what would be the correct feminine form of that? Sisterin? We are all brothers and sisters in the human family, and it is one genome responsible for all the people. And even though there's all this debate and argument about how, whether Cro-Magnon and Homo sapien erectus, there's some sort of cross. If you zoom out big enough, as I've pointed out before on the show in different segments, if you zoom out big enough, all of life originates in one genome. There's a really beautiful and elegant map of how closely interrelated all the different life forms are, and how, for that to work correctly, the genome had to build out from one original place. Or as I like to post in other places, I don't think I've ever said this on the show, regardless of which segment I may ramble on about this set of themes. I don't think I've ever said that, or maybe I have, I don't know, whatever. I should never say never, and should never say always, because you're probably always wrong. Oop, ba-dum, boom. Too many thoughts all collided at once in the open space that I try to create there. But life, right? Life is one thing that is in many variations, expressing a multiplicity of form, an infinite array of form. But it's one thing in many forms, many forms of life, many life forms. It's one event. It's one unity that is unfolding itself to achieve all these ever increasingly complex entities. So, not only is the entire human species one family, all that is alive, I can only speak for that which I understand about here on this particular planet, regardless of its shape. Already done several episodes about that, or at least rambled on about it in different episodes about that. I'm not here to contribute to the flat earth globalist or globist debate. I'm here to say that the debate is a dead end. We've got other issues to deal with, and it's not just distractionary stuff like, oh my gosh, a war. Yeah, of course, that's always true, and it's not just a distraction from flat earth. Rather, flat earth is a distraction from war. Forgive me. That's my point. Flat earthers, y'all being used. But I digress. This is not a flat earth episode. What the fuck is I was talking about? Oh, I started off to come full circle and have a delightful stoner moment with y'all. Share a stonerly moment. What? when I go on hiatus, I don't listen to the stuff that I record. And so I forget what's in there. And moments ago, despite all the tangents I went on there to get here, and all this talk about life and genomes, and it's all one thing, man. We're all one people. We're all here to uplift each other. That's always the common goal and thread of all the different things I talk about in all the different segments. I haven't done a Cannabis Talk episode in ages. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't smoked cannabis in ages. But I don't exactly remember when the last cannabis episode was. It's been at least, I would venture a guess, 3 months minimum. Maybe more. I don't know. I think this technically is the first Cannabis Talk episode that I've sat down to record under the theme and subject and idea of Cannabis Talk in all of 2019, which is cute, right? Because 2019, it's about to be 2020, and it was just 420 this weekend, and today, and because I was at work, bless their hearts, I love them all at work, but it's the only time, I love, so many tangents, I gotta tie them all up. Love my work, love the people there, human institution, flaws, drama, whatever, I try not to get involved. And we're all people, so we have disagreements and whatever. I always go to that job with love and admiration and wanting to bring the magic, right? I rarely do I ever wish I was somewhere else when I'm at that job, and that's a crazy sounding thing to say, because most people, I don't know, I don't want to put a number to it, but I think if you ask the average person on the street, they'd be like, no, I can think of 17,000 places I'd rather be than at my job, any given day of my job. And I feel horrible that is the case for so many people. And while my job is not perfect, and there's certainly flaws and problems, like I said, human endeavors, can't avoid it. Ego gets into all things, vis-a-vis all people. Thus, we need to escape our ego traps and heal ego one at a time, and then all together to fix it. See how it all connects? But my point is, this is the one weekend ever out of the year that no matter how cool the show is, no matter how awesome the assembled crew of new and or regular crew members are, and no matter how brilliantly, epically well it's all going, I would genuinely, in a sincere, respectable, humble, I don't mean to disrespect anyone or anything, I really would rather be somewhere else, like out in nature, in a tent with a camper trailer for backup, but so primarily like sleeping in under the tent, so I can with the kind of skylight netting, so you can see the sky at night, hopefully, because it's great weather, especially around here, to like bundle up and camp that way. And then if it gets too cold, and instead of freaking out, you get into the camper mobile, right? But to be out there somewhere where it's just far out enough that there's stars and a true clear view of the full panorama of the night sky, so that I can enjoy 3 nights in semi-isolation. I would never take it too hardcore. I'd want others around. And ideally, this would be something I think, I would do with future life partners or family members or whatever, friends that find this interesting. And here's why. It's the only time of the year that I celebrate a holiday. Right? And here's where we come really full circle in so many ways that I can connect dots and threads. Now, 420 isn't really a holiday unless you choose it to be. And there is no historical tradition of the number 420, I mean, deeper than like the late 60s and maybe the 50s. According to some old-timers that I met in the Bay Area who claimed to be, I forget what, it's so long ago now that it's all fuzzy. I can't remember if they claimed to be direct relatives of members, of actual original members of the group of people that truly and originally originated the term 420 and the reasons for which they did. But these old-timers claim to be somehow very closely connected, 1 or 2 degrees of separation to that group of people. and there is lore amongst hippies and whatnot of the older generation, that there was indeed a group of kids out in the Bay Area, and the thing is, no one's really entirely sure which town, whether it was in the city or out in up north over the Golden Gate, or out east over the oh god, Bay people are gonna like vote me down for not remembering the Bay Bridge. Oh god, what the fuck is wrong with me? But regardless, when I lived up there briefly, and I really, truly, genuinely felt like a very at-home tourist the whole time. No offense, Bay folks. I miss it. I miss the city. I miss the Bay. I miss the East Bay. I miss the whole area and northwards that I never really got to explore as fully as I would have liked. In fact, if anybody wants to like discover me and transplant me to Silicon Valley, let's go. I'm waiting. I'm inviting. I'm welcoming in. I'm trying to manifest it. So put it out there. I digress. When I lived up there and lived with the most progressive, sort of woke for the time when there was nobody calling it #woke, and thoughtful and connected to their intuition and really, really wise, understanding, knowledgeable about cannabis. And I've known all kinds of stoners, man. Okay? I've always been friends to stoners. There's been stoners forever. Okay? For anybody listening who's relatively young, no offense, not judging, I'm just saying this level of cannabis acceptance in our culture is really quite remarkable. There was a time in my lifetime, arguably when I was some of you guys' age, depending on who's listening, right? If anybody under the age of 28 is listening, then this is what I'm talking about. You know, under the age of 25, especially back when I didn't smoke at all, but I had plenty of friends who did and magically had access. I had connections to people that were passionate about it in a time when it was not just sort of really underground cool and only a little bit surface cool, but like kind of edgy and kind of dangerous and kind of often connected to very negative portals, people that can connect you to negative people. And I'm not making judgments, because there's a whole criminal justice ingredient, which I always try to bring to the forefront, especially on this segment of the Almost Daily Zencast variety show. But we won't pause there today, because we're talking about spiritual applications, right? The title of today's show. Let me stop spewing mental word vomit at you, like a million miles a second. Forgive me for my madness. So the hell am I talking about? I don't know. Let's take a minute. If you are listening and you are a fellow member of the tribe, cheers. Medicinal, recreational, spiritual. Today's episode title. What is cannabis? I think might have been the very first thing that I thought of. I'm like, that's so dorky. No one's going to want to click on that. But I digress. The one thing that cannabis, that weed, pot, I used to always, as a young person, understand, it might have been a local thing in California, Southern California, used to understand growing up that dope was exclusively weed. Now dope is a bunch of other things too, and I guess it's some sort of co-opting of the term that often happens in situations like these. So I'm less interested in that term than others, but the one thing that weed, I like cannabis the most. It's the most dignified and respectable sounding. The one thing that cannabis is not, to finish a sentence, and no more interruptions, is a drug. cannabis is not a drug. What is a drug then, right? Well, a lot of things get labeled a drug, but what is it really? Well, in my humble opinion, in today's era, and I mean starting from before I was born, and I'm old enough to have caught the tail end of the 70s a little bit, was aware, of the 70s, if not actually actively doing stuff. I'm not that old. I was born in the late 70s, the end of the 70s, so it's not like I had much opportunity to explore the world as it was in that decade. But I think I have some insight to it, in terms of that I lived in the echoes and the shadows of it before the 80s really, really cemented themselves as the 80s and transformed everything. As I've expressed before, I was shocked when I realized that 70s were not the pinnacle and the end of our cultural evolution, and that it would just be changed every decade. And it took me a minute to realize, and by a minute I mean 30 years. So by no, that's not true. But I think by 16, I was pretty confident, in a sort of wild, I didn't really have enough evidence to prove it, that our society itself is designed to just forcibly change our tastes in order to perpetuate an ongoing consumption of ever-changing products that are essentially the same product over and over again. So, what year was it when I was 17? I don't remember. I don't do math in my head, especially not fucking calendar math. By the way, sidebar that I'm going to touch on in a more organized fashion on other episodes, but this just popped in my head because I said calendar. Have you ever stopped and wondered, dear friends? Many of you, of course, are on top of this, right? You probably already know where I'm coming from and going to. But have you ever stopped and wondered, for those of you who don't, I'm not mocking you. For those of you who do know, don't mock those who don't. I'm still honestly asking the question to everybody. Where we got our calendar, why the calendar is structured the way it is, and who the fuck Gregor is. Because it's, our calendar as we know it is the Gregorian calendar. Who the fuck is Gregor, or Gregorian, if it's the Gregorian apostrophe because of possessive Gregorian's calendar? I don't think it is, though. I think it's Gregory IAN, as in his name is Gregor, and then this whole category of knowledge is attributed to him. So it is Gregorian knowledge, Gregorian calendar, Gregorian intellectual property or construct. And why is it structured the way it is? Most people will be like, dude, who gives a fuck? And in response, I'd be like, dude, I do. And also, dude means whale's penis. And although I'm literally wearing my robes right now, by the way. If anybody is listening from this church, I'm an official ordained minister of the Church of Dude. Dudeism. Although, it really isn't very ismy, if you know what that means. But that's a really sophisticated grammar joke that I don't think but 1% of any audience would ever get. And everyone else would be like, what is he trying to say? But then again, maybe I'm pretending to be a grammar snob and I'm really not. But, so dude is a funny word, is my point with that. But I digress. Criminal justice reform, to pick one of the bazillion topics I just barreled through in that whole opening section. Criminal justice reform is something I think we should have a deeper conversation about and make sure we don't lose track of as we move forward with the state-by-state conquest of recreational legalization. And I know that everyone's got bullseyes, laser beam targets on federal legalization or decriminalization or declassification from Class A1 narcotic. I think all three of them should be done in one big bundle deal. I think, weed should be able to grow in our backyards like tomatoes, and that there should be no fucking issue about it, period. And there shouldn't be a black market, period. And there shouldn't be any reason why you can't just walk into your local pharmacy and get reasonably priced, well created, well produced, locally sourced, locally grown, locally manufactured, employing fellow Americans hemp and cannabis products that are good for you, that aren't toxic, and that might fucking help your symptoms and or maybe even heal your disease instead of pharmaceutically produced, profiteering product that just masks shit. Right? Cannabis is not a drug. Drugs, there's two kinds of drugs, right? And that's why we have a war on drugs. And the war on drugs is a war between pharmaceutical drugs and, quote, recreational drugs or mind-altering drugs. And in that regard, I guess maybe you could say cannabis is a drug because it does have some interesting headspace enhancing impacts. It is not the end-all be-all of what it does and how it can relate to you as a human talking monkey suit. The relationship is so much deeper there than the authoritarian oppression system has allowed us to realize, right? So, what's my point? What am I talking about? I don't know. We're getting high together, so we're just throwing things. Ideally, the way this show would really work is that there'd be a group of people sitting around my iPad, and we would all take turns spewing out crazy, mildly disjointed stoner thoughts about the world's problems and have those epic conversations. You've all heard stories. Me and my friend got so high last week, we solved hunger. And it was legit. We thought it through 3 times, and it was for reals. We weren't just being stupid, but we were so fucking high, we didn't write it down. And then the next day we were like, what was it? We've all had those, right? Those aren't just funny, fluky, quirky side effects of smoking weed. Cannabis is not a drug in the way that pharmaceuticals want drugs to be, as in a good drug, right? It's not. It isn't. And that's why, up until recently, Big Pharma has been generally opposed to cannabis. And also, up until recently, very covertly prepping their backdoor entry into hijacking cannabis industry. Because they're gonna. We always freak out about it every decade and every step of the way in the, quote, fight. I hate that word. You all know, I've rambled about it before. In the, quote, fight for cannabis rights. So they're now trying to also, as they reach, they're not just giving us the, undercover reach around. They're also kind of going over the top and just going surface, oh yeah, maybe cannabis does do good things. Maybe we do need to start taking patents out on it and start limiting who can breed, who can grow, who can sell, blah, 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 blah. Because it's enough wokefulness has built around cannabis. Enough people have seen that video or those videos of people like that first really powerful, historic. She should be remembered in cannabis culture, by the way, you guys. Little Charlotte, for which Charlotte's Web strain is famous for, I think, unless I'm getting the names all wrong, because I sometimes do that. I apologize to the world if I am. But right, isn't that her name, Charlotte? Little Charlotte, she was one of the first. She wasn't actually the first, I don't think. There have been other recorded cases of youth being administered some kind of cannabis extract product, not being forced to smoke a joint. That would be stupid. But being given some kind of oil extract or tincture infusion of the distillate of the active compounds, and that there had been successful examples of it soothing and or ultimately helping to control, if not outright stop, whatever form of seizures and or tremors and or other sort of health issues that she was encountering. So remember her, you guys. Tell the story. Pay that forward. Remind the youth that shit went on and that fight's still happening, because kids and vets still don't have free and clear access to this powerful healing entheogenic plant. See, now that's where we get into the nuance of what I want to talk about, right? Like, I started out like, cannabis ain't a drug. Okay, well, what are drugs? There's pharmaceutical drugs, and then there's like mind-altering drugs. And cannabis could be lumped in with the mind-altering drugs. But those drugs, in my opinion, are not drugs. In my opinion, the word drug is being stretched and used in a sort of divide and confuse sort of way, right? Like, the drugs you get from your doctor are good, and the drugs you get from your drug dealer are bad. And we got to put all the drug dealers in jail, is what society has pushed our entire lifetimes. And the truth of the matter is, and there is plenty of historical evidence, by the way, and for those of you who want to see two particular evidences, pictures that come from Christian art, from, I mean, like old school, early, I guess technically it wouldn't be ancient Christian, but because ancient implies like before Christianity, but like post the death of the person that the label Yeshua Christos points to, but before the formulation of the Roman Catholic Church, or maybe right at the very beginnings of the Roman Catholic Church, which, by the way, for a very long time was the only church, not just the only Catholic Church, not just the only Christian church. They wanted to be the only church, which is why they went all over the world in the name of Jesus, killing everybody. Which to talk about in other episodes at great depth, right? We got to forgive them for that shit, because forgiveness is how we solve everything. Especially, hello, join me in this, because even if you're a stoner and an atheist, a stoner and something else, like, this is duh, right? Like, y'all should know this, that especially the Jesus people, that's what Jesus taught. He taught forgiveness, not stab your enemy with a sword in the eye. You know? He didn't say an eye for an eye would render the world blind, but I think it was Gandhi, right? Or was he quoting Jesus when Gandhi said that? Ooh, stoner moment. I'm having a moment where, like, I'm seeing them both, like, say it, and like a split screen. Like, if this were a movie, it would cut to split screen, two dark panels. One lightens up and it's Jesus, you know, a very kind of like white Jesus, and he says, you know, an eye for an eye leaves the world blind. And then he freezes, and then the second panel, and it's a very sort of like Ben Kingsley Gandhi. It's not actually Ben Kingsley. Well, no, maybe if he's still around, if we ever make this movie, I don't remember what movie we're talking about, but if we ever make this movie that this is in, or that we're going to jam into, we'll see if we can get Ben Kingsley. But Ben Kingsley, Gandhi, and he says, in some variation of an eye for an eye, I can't do an Indian accent. And if I did, people would just go, oh, he's racist, and I'm not, but whatever. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, right? And then cut back to, or away to, from that, like that was like a commercial break. So cut back to like the main through line, and it's the actual Yeshua Christos and the actual spirit body of Mahatma Gandhi. And I don't know if I said Mahatma Gandhi's name right. I've always thought that's how it was pronounced, but I may be totally wrong, right? Like, only people who grew up with it in India would know correctly and truly. That's just how I've heard it said here in the States. And then, so, to finish the scene, Mahatma Gandhi, let's keep it like that, easier, Gandhi and Yeshua are chilling in a room that is, clearly meant to imply quote-unquote heaven, and then they would continue chit-chatting about that statement and about what it means, like for reals, in a serious, in-depth way. I think that would be cool, and we should throw it in there. And I'm like really, really spiraled out of control from wherever the heck we started from. Because I meant to actually have some organized thoughts about the title and the subject line, and I haven't even addressed those right, and I've already been rambling for 39 minutes and 50 seconds. So forgive me. Let me harness the powers of my stoner brain and bring it to you. Medicinal, recreational, spiritual. Cannabis, in my opinion, and some of the mind-altering, naturally occurring substances that are that don't need to be massively concocted. So I'm kind of a snob, I guess. Like, cocaine is not in the category I'm currently trying to develop or define in this rambling talk, right? Like, I would not put cocaine in here. And others might say that I'm wrong, but let me tell you, I've read enough, I've spoken to enough people who have firsthand experience, and I have enough direct experience with it myself to say, no, it does not belong in the category that I'm trying to define. But here's a list of substances that do. Top of the list, DMT. And preferably, ideally, in its like ayahuasca format. So that's not pure DMT. That's DMT and a whole other suite or concert, whole other orchestra of important plant-derived, entheogenic, alchemical, dare I say, molecular ingredients or puzzle pieces are involved in a proper ayahuasca preparation. And I'm not saying go run out and do these things, folks. I'm just clarifying where I think we should categorize stuff, right? So DMT, aka ayahuasca, shrooms or psilocybin, right? Because you can get the extract. What's the other one? Peyote. I put on there, although I don't have direct personal experience with that. I've never done ayahuasca either. I've listened to enough people who have, and read enough on the research side of things to agree with and synthesize, formulate my own conclusions. And there's probably other quite readily forgotten helpful plants that are up the same alley. And I think that there might be a class of a hitherto forgotten or sort of buried or sort of they did a hit job on it, sort of classification system of various interrelated but different what you might call sacred entheogenic plants. And arguably lost in the mist of time before we fully fell into the trap of our own ego hijacking ourselves from ourselves. We had arguably, theoretically speaking, we had a deep knowledge and an ongoing relationship with this whole array of entheogenic, quote-unquote, magical, quote-unquote, sacred plants. And cannabis is one of them in that category, and thus not a drug, right? And it's not a drug. And it's not many people in this day and age, with good intentions, many well-intentioned cannabis supporters have said, well, it's equivalent to alcohol. And I think I have expressed this before, and I shall always stand up for this again, over and over again. It's not. Alcohol literally is toxic waste, and getting drunk is your body going, yo, that's bad for you. It's toxic waste. That's why you puke. That's why you have a hangover. The problem is they make it taste good. They put a lot of sugar in it, which makes it even more addictive than it already was. And as some anthropologists have pointed out to us, there's fact-based evidence to indicate that our species co-evolved a negative, unhealthy relationship to it. But that it also, alcohol, when not overconsumed and when not over-saccharinized, it can contribute in very small doses to a positive effect, right? It has positive health benefits, when basically, essentially, microdosed. But microdosing alcohol is not the same as being drunk all day, friends. But it explains, perhaps, why, with some exceptions, alcohol is often seen contemporary and in history, both, not ancient and ancient history. Alcohol is used as a sacrament and as a tool of spiritual practice. In our modern era, we've only just recently popularized and reaccepted that cannabis, or some say we've discovered that cannabis has healing properties. I would suggest to you, my friends, that there's plenty of evidence, including historical depictions in paintings from all kinds of cultures, from different places all over the planet, that indicate that cannabis and mushrooms and other sacred plants like those, like peyote, like I forget the name of it now, but the whatever the name of the plant is that goes into the two plants that go, because you need two of them, right? You need two plants whose chemistry works in concert together. How do two plants develop chemistry that works in concert together to render an interesting, positive, and useful, healing? Like, it's not an accident, right? Like, there's something to it all. And I would argue, dear friends, and I'll stop blathering at you because I'm trying to limit these things to under an hour, right? On all the fronts. That as we've been rediscovering that it does indeed have medicinal qualities, and as our postmodern system has had to adjust, that we've demanded our rights and continue, right, to demand our rights to have access to this. And as we are now transitioning into this normalization of it recreationally, I always try to bring it back to some friendly reminders that we are presented a choice. We can absent-mindedly build a cannabis culture and let business interests from all the different sectors that want to profiteer on this growing acceptance, this growing sector, this growing market, let them set the tone of this cannabis culture, or we can dig down deep, my friends, and do research on all fronts and not let big business hijack it, right? Like, let the science be clean and let the anthropological research be real, and let us look into the mysterious and the esoteric and the convergence of where it seems like history and some of our brothers and sisters who have carried forward in time the indigenous traditions that they have been privy to through their family tree. See, these things all have a common chorus indicating that nature herself is giving us these gifts that are nutritious, that are sustaining, that are, I'm not trying to argue for veganism, although some kind of vegetable plant-based diet would be pretty freaking awesome. There's also a pretty strong argument for it to be a mixed diet, and that it be an elevated, holistic, spiritual diet where we acknowledge that all life needs to consume life, and that all life is life, even plants. And that means they're all driven by consciousness, which means that even plants suffer if we don't treat them well and love them as we consume them. But I've already done that episode, I think, right? I don't know. Everything comes in spirals, so it's difficult to determine when I've been too repetitive. I hope it isn't something that alienates people or bugs them. I hope that I have sown the seeds of things and spoken of them in different directions from different angles enough that when vertices or junctions between thoughts and themes I come back to in a sort of repetitious way are actually building up to greater and more interesting perspective instead of just being boring, and repetitious. But I know I talk a lot. Forgive me, friends. There's just so much I think we need to turn our consciousness towards and maybe share a little bit of group meditation on in order to break down the boundaries between the dystopian fate we fear we are doomed for and the utopian alternative that we're too easy to dismiss as impossible, because, quite frankly, it's not. If you look at dystopia and utopia as symbols for heaven and hell, which are simply symbols for yin and yang, which are, part of the collection of symbols like good and evil, and soul and ego, ego mind. These things reside within us. Crazy, right? And so there is no fearing going to hell. This is hell. We are in it now. And it is up to us to respond to it in a healing and transcendent way so that it itself can transcend being hell, right? Like the solution isn't to kill the oppressors that control the puppets in government office. The solution is to heal the whole human species. And some people are already down with that, have been down with that for a really long time. But that language of ego trap to distract us creeps in even there, in the demographics of spiritual and supposedly enlightened and wokeful and wokened, whatever the right conjugation of that word is, because people are talking about killing their ego. Kill your ego. Your ego is you. Satan is you, or better yet, Satan is you, not you or Satan. But those two things are intractable, inseparable. As God is inseparable from whatever you want to call God's opposite. Up is inseparable from down, is it not? Left, you cannot tear it apart from right. North and south, east and west. The whole universe functions that way because the whole universe is that. And it is living that out. We are that. And inside of us, instead of trying to rip those things apart and beat one into submission using the blunt, bloody tool of the other, we should be healing and integrating and reunifying them. Isn't that what the Last Jedi was all about? I'm not stealing this from The Last Jedi. This shit is ancient. Many people said this a really long time ago, and curiously, these people tend to get butchered and slaughtered and killed and called crazy names like heretic and witch and possessed, etc., etc., etc. The profiteers want us eternally fighting each other. That's why everything is the way it is now. And we are literally growing and consuming one of the powerful tools available to us in the resistance as part of the solution. And I don't mean just smoke a lot of weed, right? Because weed is a divine gift from Mother Goddess. And if all life is alive, and if all life is consciousness, then weed can respond to your conscious intent. If you approach cannabis like a drug, it will fuck you up like a drug. If you approach cannabis like alcohol, and you approach it like a respectable gentleman or gentlewoman drinker, then it will seduce you the way alcohol seduces gentlemen and gentlewomen drinkers and turns them into alcoholics. But the cool part is, alcohol turns you into alcoholic and then begins to destroy your body. Weed, which cannot destroy your body because it heals, weed might turn you into a weedaholic, and then it'll destroy your other, mental addictions. It will render you aware because, you spared yourself the alcoholism. You didn't fall into that trap. And if you aren't already on other drugs, it will work with whatever the fuck shit you're addicted to in your mind. And I just had this thought pop up in my head, like, weed is a portal. It's a gateway drug to other drugs. But no, it's not. It is a portal, but it is a way to heal yourself off of the drugs you are abusing. It will force you to confront it in an ever increasingly uncompromising way until you can no longer fuck with your own head enough to let yourself keep doing the toxic things. Why? Because cannabis is a divine gift from Mother Goddess, and it is conscious, and it is here to help us heal. It is most powerful when we approach it with the conscious intent of meditation partner. And it is most powerful when people do that together. That's why yoga, cannabis yoga, is starting to pick up so hot. You don't even have to approach it like I do, on purpose, overt, stated, like I'm declaring cannabis is a living fucking ally. It can and will talk to you if you just fucking listen the right way. And, it's trying to do these things with us. You can just go do yoga and pretend that weed is just cool and it makes you feel nice and it's good for your body, and it'll do the job anyways. It's working, right? It's doing the job of being the antidote to the toxic things we made ourselves addicted to. And some of the other more powerful entheogenic spiritual tools, spiritual allies that are living plant sisters and brothers, they do the same sorts of work at higher orders of magnitude, at higher quadrants of power and urgency. And they were once, as I've said before, and I'll probably say again in the show, not just commonly respected, but held in awe as, powerful and magical. And now that we have science in a more robust place, we should return to that, right? And make it even more well understood and enlightening and empowering and powerful of a collection of tools and allies, if we come at them not just to understand their chemistry, which is what all the industry is fighting about, right? Because chemistry you can patent. They haven't yet figured out how to patent spirituality. The closest they can get to that is organized religion. But that is so oppressive and so self-undermining, because spirit doesn't need power. Spirit doesn't want tyranny. Spirit doesn't want to control and tyrannically dictate others what to do. Spirit knows that we are all one, and we just need to live our true lives anchored and rooted in love, and in a divine communion with the divinity that is manifesting this reality. And I'll tell you what, these are things I had come across and contemplated before I began my relationship with cannabis, but that I could not claim to really know, could not claim to really understand. But nowadays, having experimented, explored, both absent-mindedly and scientifically, mind you, with a totally granted amateur citizen scientist methodology, which cannot be considered rigorous by any means, but definitely in the spirit of going, hey, can I repeat that experience, or was that fluky? Can I confirm that these are the things involved, or was it just something that happened? I don't have a laboratory, but my life for some time now, and most interestingly, since medicinal cannabis became, a right that we'd achieved to wrestle from our delightful government, I've been really diving into on more and more levels and in a more and more intense way, with, as all good amateur citizen scientists I'm sure would agree, features of safety and protocol features of safety and control and thoughtfulness and not the the boundaries of not causing any harm to myself or others. Duh. Right, so cannabis is accused of being a lot of things, and those of you who already have a relationship with it understand that most of those things are untrue. But there's a lot of things that cannabis is that we aren't really recognizing, that we aren't really taking into account. And that's one of the things I wanted to drive at with the question, or with the descriptor for today's episode. Cannabis responds to your conscious intent. It's something that I've written out before and posted on social media, and that I'm sure to return to as a theme and subject to explore. And I wanted to just lay that out there and reach out to other people who might have some experience in this realm enough to want to comment and share with the podcast about it, so that we can raise clearer and clearer understanding and not miss out, I think, in what is arguably the much more important, and should be, I think, theoretically, the much more appealing opportunity at our disposal, available to us as our culture, both here at home in the United States of Trumptopia, and abroad in other countries that struggle with, or don't struggle with, their own creep towards Trumptopianism. What would be the right conjugation? Regardless, leave that alone for another time. And that's that cannabis, as one attempt to interpret the Bible suggests, is for the healing of the nations. And that's what Revelations is talking about, that we're supposed to really work with cannabis, not just as a product, not just as a recreational toxic substance equal to and not different from alcohol, which is a lie and an incorrect way to approach cannabis with your conscious intent. If you've been brainwashed to think that's all it is, that's all it's going to treat you as, until it does its job and seduces you into discovering that it's more than that. But at first, it's going to beat your ass down for coming at it the wrong way. Trust me, I've seen it. I've seen it over and over and over again. And it's something we don't have any literature about. It's something we don't have there's no movies about this. There's not any real culture around how best to approach cannabis if one recognizes that it's not just a drug. It's not just a thing to party with. It's not just a really fun plant with a really great set of chemicals in them, right? That it's something more. And it's something that's asking us to uphold our end, because none of this shit is an accident. There's actually some, spiritual calling, some spiritual work that the universe is asking us to do, and that cannabis and other entheogenic plants are like, the tools with which we can prepare to do that work, and we're radically ignoring it. And that work is so much more important than tearing up our planet and then celebrating really shallow, empty, profit-driven holidays about protecting Earth. We're ripping up our planet to do everything. Everything we do requires the ripping up and commodification and intoxication and polutification of our planet. And ultimately, that spells not death for the planet, because it can and probably will survive us. It's survived other obnoxious life forms besides us, and it's survived other iterations of us ourselves. We'll have to do whole other episodes about that. But it's still, that's great. It will survive us. But that for it to survive us is for us to doom ourselves to a dystopian future that basically guarantees a self-destructive end in whatever wild array of ways we might self-destroy ourselves. And then if we fail at really totally eradicating ourselves because we vote for self-destruction, but then kind of wishy-washy, half-assed butcher the job of butchering ourselves, then, you know, the asteroid will come and wipe the slate clean. But that's like the last straw. I digress. These friends, these allies, these magical plants that are aware and are reaching out to us and have messages for us really want to help us not destroy ourselves that way. And if we would just allow ourselves to explore them in that fashion, we could radically transform the world, and we can radically heal the species in a way that no war profiteer, no warmonger, no terrorist from this religion or that religion, no capitalist from that oligarchist from that corrupt state or this corrupt profiteering state can prevent. Because no amount of money in the world can stop the process of cosmic healing as it is organically capable of happening, right? It can only delay it, slow it down, and distract us from engaging in that process. And here's the proof of it why. We've been around for a really long time. Arguably, according to some folks, we've not only been around for a really long time, we've been around for a lot longer than mainstream and even alternative histories might indicate. We've been around for so long that we've had Atlantis and the sinking of Atlantis and the rediscovery of Atlantis 3 times before now. And we're about to rediscover Atlantis. Okay? So whatever. Who knows how many times we've done this. If the universe is an infinitely self-referencing fractal, unwinding and infolding in infinite layers of complexity, then all of this goes on forever ad nauseum. Infinitely. So let's stop butchering ourselves and start lifting ourselves up through higher orders of complexity of our own evolution. That's the calling. And cannabis is here to help us get there. So, when you spark up, man, don't spark up and treat it like a drug, because you're abusing and neglecting a very powerful and intense plant sister ally, magic spirit ally. And you're reducing it, you're objectifying it. You know, it's just like, what's the Me Too movement about? Guys, stop objectifying women. The moment you stop relying on an objectified worldview, then you can treat other people like people. Well, we got to stop objectifying plants, especially the magical ones that are here to help us. Because as soon as we no longer objectify them and turn them into inarticulate, inordinate things to do with as we please, then we can relate to them and have a relationship with them and learn from them and, continue, maybe reignite the co-evolution that clearly had to have been going on long ago for us to have built-in cannabinoid receivers and DMT, as part of our human apparatus long before, we're born. It's there. But anyways, I guess I've rambled on long enough. Updates. What's going on that I want to pin on the little board in the shared mental space that we occupy when we have these chats. Whenever I say I put a pin on it, not pin on it, that's put a bird on it. Put a pin in this, put a pin in that. Whenever I say anything about a pin, I always visualize one of those slick, glossy, you almost wonder if it's made out of glass, red ball push pins. Those are the worst, right? They hurt your fucking thumb bone. But I imagine those because they're the prettiest. Pinned to an imaginary board that hangs suspended off to my right, which arguably, if you were sitting in front of me, at this table that I sit at, it would be on your left. And there we have this constellation of things pinned up that we'll come back to and discuss in greater depth when we come back for another chit-chat. But for now, I've got to move on. I've got chores to do, and I think I've really, really, really camped the mic, as some of the old-timers used to say. And I should stop, because you're all tired of listening to me ramble anyways, aren't you? I'm not doing this because I think I'm right. I'm not doing this because I want you to believe in me. I'm not doing this because I want you to feel upset or because I think your belief system is wrong. I'm doing this because Mother Nature will not remain unacknowledged. And Mother Nature will no longer allow the human species to neglect her in this objectification, commodification, consumption, abuse relationship that we have. And we've got to step up to that microphone. We've got to step up to that challenge, that calling, that spotlight. We've got to step up and hold ourselves accountable and fix things. And the most powerful thing that we can do is investigate the powers of healing that we've been fooled, conditioned, lied to, tricked, hoodwinked into neglecting. To that end, I say to you, my friends, every time I ramble at you and on any of these podcasts, I am busy deep, deep inside in the inner workings of my mind and the many layers behind my talking box, working to broadcast peace, love, grooviness, healing frequencies, and all the magical hippie mumbo jumbo vocabulary you want, because it's not the words. While words matter, we say that at my day job at this other dimension that I hang out at all the time, but words do matter. And I'm not belittling words, I'm not belittling the use of words. Understand words better, folks. But while words matter, ultimately the words aren't the thing, right? The menu ain't the food. So don't eat the menu, eat the food. The thing that I'm doing in the background, in the back of my head, that is my spiritual practice, whatever words work the best for it to feel right for you, I'm praying. I'm broadcast praying, not just asking God. I'm also sending to you that power which I have. I'm not claiming to have a lot, but whatever I've got, I send it to you through my voice, through the frequencies of the words that I pick, and the language that I use, and through my conscious intent and willpower. Is that magic? I don't know. Is it real? I think so. Why don't you believe in magic anymore? We all did as kids. Now we argue about it because some of us do and some of us don't. Isn't that weird how that happened? And yet magic, the magic of love, rather, pardon that cart before the horse phrasing right there, or horse before, yeah. The magic of love, the power of love, instead of the love of power, right? And the magics of power, which power has its own magic. Everything has its own magic. That shit is real. It's real in such a way that if you choose to disbelieve in it, you will not encounter it at all. That's why the ancients say, he who does not believe in magic shall never find it. And all the variants, right? Like Tinkerbell's gotta get you to believe in order to save Peter Pan. We're at that point, right? If the story of the play / movie, well, the play, because they don't really do this in the movie, it's in the play, in not all of the variations, but some. But you got to clap as an audience because you got to tell Tinkerbell that you believe and that you are sending her the power of your belief, and you're doing it by clapping and applauding, and that whips the audience into a big hoo-ha. If that is hippie new age nonsense bullshit, then why can it be so powerful when we do it together? And why is like tribalism, tribal magic work, tribal dance work, something that the empire of oppression has spent so many thousands of years trying to eradicate? I've asked that question 1,000 times. I'm going to stop rambling. As always, my friends, thanks for tuning in. May you receive the healing, peace, love, and grooviness energies that I send to you and to all our brothers and sisters in this species and in all the species that we're interrelated with. And may that help you find your quiet place. I know I just rambled a lot of crazy vomit word vomit. Oh, that was a gross image, right? But behind all those crazy words, there's this quiet place that I hope you might discover in yourself. Because that's what we're here to help each other find, in my opinion. Until next time, I have been the incorrigible Mr. Zappo. Well, folks, that bowl is cashed and dusted. Thank you for joining me for yet another most excellent session of Cannabis Talk. Stay lit, pay it forward, and remember, the world needs healing, and cannabis heals. Until next time, I have been your spiritual cannabis mystic talk show host, the incorrigible Mr. Zappo. For coughing. As my old and very dear friend of mine used to say, I guess he still says it, I don't know. He would say, after a good, solid coughing fit, he would, kudos himself. He'd pat himself on the back and say something like, yeah, way to get it in there. And I would ask him I asked him once, after a while of watching him do that, what is that about, man? And he responded, when you're coughing, it's like the opposite of when you're coughing because of cigarettes. When you have a smoker's cough, you're hacking out your lung because it's all gross and nasty and dying from the tar. When you've got the cannabis cough, you're getting the healing nutrients, CBDs and THCs, from the cannabis smoke deeper in your lungs, which is helping to push out and clean all the gross, nasty shit. So that cough is healing. It's the healing cough. Of course, I am severely paraphrasing him, and he was, at the time of that conversation, we were both extremely high. But I digress. A little bonus material for the next Cannabis Talk episode. Okay. And now for the outro.